Hey guys, it's me, Professor Wright, over at Eastern New Mexico University. I'm here today to do a quick demo of how to create slabs for your slab building assignment. You're either going to make a pot or a sculpture of some kind, a vessel for this course. And today, yeah, like I said, I'm just demonstrating the slab technique. Some of the things I'm going to talk about in this video, you should have already seen demoed in class or done for previous assignments. But yeah, anyway, to kick off, I'm going to talk about what sort of stuff you need for this activity of creating slabs. So first of all, you're going to, of course, need your clay. You should have the clay nice and wedged up and ready to go. You should normally leave it covered while you're working, although I just have it uncovered for right now because I'm going to work pretty quick in this demo. So you need, of course, yeah, that clay ready to go, plenty of it. You need a small bucket of slip and water, or a small cup of some kind. And then as far as tools go, you're going to want various things for cutting, slipping and scoring, shaping these slabs. So first off, I would say for cutting, sorry, I'm going to have to reach off the video here. You have a couple options. You can use just our needle tool or one of these fettling knives. The needle tools are in one of our gray buckets that should either be on the baker's rack in the throwing room or on the tables in the hand building room. Or you can, yeah, use the fettling knife, and the fettling knives are on the baker's rack in a cup on the bottom row. I'm looking at them from here. So yeah, you're gonna want use one of these or both. They're kind of good for different types of cuts. And then you're also gonna need some ribs. You're gonna want a toothed rib or the sort of metal brush needle tool type thing. These are great for slipping and scoring, which you should have already learned about when doing the coil assignment or your mug assignment where you pull handles. Both of those, you'll learn it, yeah, you've done either one of those or both. And then you might also want a smooth metal rib. There is a smooth side on the toothed rib that you can see. And yeah, toothed rib, like I said, it's mainly good for slipping and scoring, but yeah, you want something with a straight edge, so it's good to have a smooth metal rib as well. There's not enough of each of these for everybody. You can share and stuff like that. You can have various other tools like a nice like straight edge scraper. This one's a little excessive. We have a few of these around. There's other things you'll want, depending on what you want to do, but probably as an option, you'll want one of these rolling pins around and some other things, which I'll get to in a minute. So anyway, yeah, getting into the actual activity itself, like I said, you want wedged clay. I forgot to say a minute ago too, but when your clay, before you start working with it, you should be sure it's wedged. I should have demoed this in class. I don't think I'll have another video for wedge or anything like that, because this video is not for a fully online class. It's sort of a hybrid situation. So you should have already learned about how to wedge. If you haven't, you can look that up or ask friends or ask me sometime if I'm around. So anyway, this video is just for if I'm out or if you miss the demo. Okay, so anyway, I've got clay ready to go, and so just to go over the basics of this idea, slab building is basically building vessels out of sheets of clay, right? When you do coils, you use ropes of clay and you stack them up. For slabs, you make sheets of clay, cut them into shapes, and then put them together. It's typically more geometric, and you can have a little bit more planned out. It's almost like origami or something, but with sheets of clay instead of sheets of paper. And so, yeah, basically all this demo really is me telling you how to best get the clay into a sheet form. So anyway, let me go ahead and pull this clay off, a little bit of it, and talk about, first off, what I want to talk about is just how to hand make a slab, right? You have a few options for that. And then I'll also talk about how to use the big slab roller here in just a few minutes. But yeah, in any case, before you start working, another tool you might be sure you have around is a board to work on. I'm using one of our canvas covered boards that you can't store on your shelf. You need to just use it during class. But you're also welcome to use any of our boards from the cabinets that yeah, you can just leave on your shelf while you're in the process of working on a slab piece. But in any case, yeah, you want to be sure you have a board. Don't be working directly on the table. Most of the time, if you're when you're assembling your slab built piece and creating slabs by hand, you're just going to be working in our hand building side of the room. But I'm doing this all right here by the slab roller tables, mainly so I can just do this in one take because I don't feel like doing all the editing. So anyway, all the like editing stuff of video, I'd love to make cool videos for you guys, but yeah, for today I'm just going to do it in one take. So that's why I'm working over here. Most of the time during the assembling process and hand making, you stay in a hand building building site. So anyway, what I always say in terms of getting your first slabs made is that, like, it doesn't have to be real complex. You don't have to use a slab roller. I never use one in my personal studio because you can always do what I just call the patty cake method, where you just sort of push it out by hand. You know, you're just essentially creating a sheet of clay here. So yeah, you patty cake it or punch it out is sometimes what I call it. You can also do what's called a slat method. This is very common, where you don't just slap the clay straight down, but you sort of drop it and like let it land and sort of stretch, because you're dropping it at an angle, right? It's almost like making pizza dough but on the table instead of in the air. You're like dropping it at an angle so that it stretches out, and you can get pretty great slabs with this. This is my favorite method to use, that is not, you know, using the wheel or a slab roller. Okay, so that's an option. And then, oh, be sure if you do that, you drop it going all different directions. Don't just drop it the same way every single time. We'll go over why that is here in a few minutes. So in any case, yeah, there's those two methods. And then, of course, a lot of people really like to just use a rolling pin, and there's nothing wrong with that. I prefer a wooden rolling pin over these rubber or plastic ones, but these are just fine as long as you keep them clean. Keep them really clean and don't let them get too crusty. But in any case, you can just rolling pin out your slab. Nothing wrong with that idea. It's going to be just fine if you do that. Okay. Now there's a few methods you can use to make sure you get a nice even slab. Making sure you don't use too much pressure on the edge is one, but there's also these sticks. I wish I had brought them over for the video, but they'll be in the classroom while you're working. They're just thin little sticks that you can set on either side of your piece of clay that basically work like a track that you can like set the rolling pin on and just slide. And there's different thicknesses. You know, each thickness just represents a thickness of the slab that you're going to make. So yeah, you just set them on either side, roll the rolling pin across them, and it just makes the clay into that same thickness. So yeah, those all work. One thing you want to keep in mind, though, every time you roll a slab, regardless of method, the first thing you want to do after you've got it rolled out is compress it, okay? Some people aren't as crazy about compression. My personal experience is that it helps, right? I'm not saying it's some magical thing that's just going to totally prevent warpage, but for the most part, if you skip it, you're more likely to get the sort of potato chip warping or even possibly cracking. With slabs, it's more so warping that I find is the issue. So to compress, all you really need to do is be sure you have your water ready, and then get your smooth rib and have it ready to go. You can use a wooden rib for this, but again, I just prefer metal rib for hand building for the most part. So anyway, I dip my metal rib into my water, and this is just nice clean water. It's not slip water. And I essentially just start sort of scraping the surface of the slab, and I go all different directions. I make sure I kind of scrape the whole surface. I'm not pushing hard enough to make the slab thinner. I'm more just sort of making it more dense, right? You can kind of feel like you're like pushing down the particles and making them tighter, right? You're gonna do that on each side. So I do one side, then I carefully pick this up, flip it over, keeping it on my board, and I will just do this again. A good guide for this is if you're working on canvas, especially after it comes out of the canvas roller, you can see the canvas on the big roller. You can see the canvas texture, and you can basically just think about you're using the rib to wipe away that texture. And notice once again, I'm going to go different directions. I'm not just swiping and compressing the same direction. I'm going multiple ways. And the reason for this is it has to do with the particles and the whole reason we're compressing. So let me go over that real quick. So compression, essentially, it's going to make the particles more uniform and what I call relax them. So how this works is essentially when you roll out a slab or stretch a slab, I like to think of it like a rubber band, and you've pulled it and it's become very tight and it wants to pull back on itself. That's not exactly how the science works, but that's how you can think of it, right? It's a rubber band, it's tight, and it wants to pull back. And if you take your rib and do this compressing action, and especially in different directions, it essentially moves these particles and relaxes them so they get used to being in the position they're in, and they're less likely to want to pull together and do that potato chip. That's also the same reason why if you're slapping or moving or rolling pinning, you want to go different directions while you're stretching it, because for the same reason, if you stretch it all the same direction, it's more likely to want to pull together. If you stretch it different directions, it's already going to be a little less likely to potato chip, because yeah, like I said, it's just being stretched different ways instead of all one. We'll talk about that more again in a minute after I use the big roller, which, yeah, I'm pretty much set to do. So for now, let me go ahead and I'm going to set this slab directly on the table, but you should know you shouldn't. Yeah, I'm going to set this here, and this is something you want to think about before you go use the big slab roller. You need to be sure you have a board or a sheet of canvas ready to go to carry your slab back to your seat where you're going to actually work with the slab after you've used the slab roller. You can't work on the slab roller because essentially you need to make room for the next person, stuff like that. So anyway, you want to be sure you have a board or sheet of canvas ready to go when you finish rolling, so you can just take it back. You don't want to just carry in the raw a sheet of clay back to your seat. You're likely to tear it or stretch it. So anyway, I'm going to pan now. Panning over to this big slab roller for the most part. Like I said, I'm just working in here right next to it so that this video could be all one take. But in general, you would only use that table I'm working on in this area to sort of prep and use the big slab roller, and then you would take all your stuff back to your seat. So anyway, I'm going to use one of these other pieces of clay now to roll my slab. I'm going to use a pretty big piece. Typically, if you're making smaller slabs, the hand making of the slabs works really great. You don't super need the slab roller unless you are making bigger slabs, or if you're just, like hand wise or something, your wrists, it's too painful or something. Otherwise, it makes it hard to hand make a slab. The slab roller is really great for that too. But for the most part, I always just say it's for bigger slab. It's all preference anyway. So yeah, so anyway, as I am getting ready to use the big slab roller, there's a few things I want to be sure I do. Like I said, I make sure I have a board ready to put my slab back on to take it back to class, or a sheet of canvas. I'm going to go ahead and grab those. They're just out of screen, so I have a couple of them ready to go. And it'll also help me talk about ways to use a slab roller. So you can bring any of these. We have these around, and the boards that you can use to carry stuff. But you want to be sure you have that ready, and then get sort of set up to roll on the slab roller. Be sure nobody else is using it right at that moment. But it helps if you get your clay kind of into a log shape, number one. So that's going to help it go into the slab roller easier. And there's a couple more things I'll say on that in just a second. But first, let's talk about how the slab roller works. Essentially, our slab rollers here at Eastern are these really nice. These are my favorite slab rollers I've really ever worked with. They're these large, for instance, they're Bailey slab rollers, good heavy duty, like large ones. And the thing to know about these is they only go one direction. Some slab rollers, you can go either way. Sometimes this thing, the actual roller, moves across the table. Yeah, there's different setups, but for ours, it only goes this way. And it's really obvious because there's two large white arrows up here on top that tell you to make your slab go this way. I don't know how many times I've seen students try to go the other way, and it's just funny, right? They're nervous, they're using new machines, so they don't catch the arrows. But yeah, we want to go that way. And then also, before you start using this slab roller, you want to check out how thick it is set. In general, I tell my students not to touch this knob. This is what sets the thickness. But if you do come up and realize somebody before you has for some reason closed it, it's sort of handy for me to tell you what thickness you should do and how to do it. So basically, what you're going to do is lean over here. On the side that you put the slabs in, there's a small ruler with an arrow next to it that tells you how thick they're set. And it should be close to about, I always just say halfway between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, right? The 1/4 and the 1/2 on this little ruler marker. That's going to be your best bet. If you are going larger, you can set it to 1/2. If you want to go smaller and thinner, you can go to 1/4. Although I will say, with slabs, this is just a general tip for slab building, is don't go too thin. A lot of people want to go really thin, and it creates a lot of frustration. So I'll go into more tips in a bit. But yeah, that's my first one, is like, don't go too thin. Just my first general tip. So anyway, we be sure it's set. If it is somewhere between that 1/4 and 1/2 inch mark, you're good. You're perfect. Even if it seems a little thick, you got to remember the canvas is going to make it a little bit thinner, and your compressing might make it even a little thinner still. So yeah, just leave it set there. If you need to turn this knob to set it between there, just be conscious of what you're doing. It's just one side. You don't have to turn both, just one. And the biggest thing is Make sure nobody closes it. I have had students try to roll it through with it set at 0, and it creates a big, we have to shut it down for the day and I have to clean it up. It's a whole mess. So anyway, yeah, we're ready to go. So this is good to go, and you'll always kind of pull counterclockwise to roll with this slab roller. Clockwise doesn't do anything. You can hear it stops clicking. It's really just unwinding my handle. So yeah, don't do that. Cool. So anyway, before you start setting your clay into the slab roller, a couple more things. You're never, ever, ever going to just put the clay directly into these rollers. If you do, it's a real pain because, again, these teeth are meant to grab canvas or something, and they're just really grippy, and they'll just fill up with clay that then, again, we have to shut it down. We got to clean. I got to get brushes and do all sorts of stuff. So we always be sure we have canvas on top of and below our piece of clay as we're rolling it through, right? It needs to be sandwiched in some way between pieces of canvas, and make sure that the clay never touches the rollers itself, or the rollers themselves, okay? So for that process, I have 2 options for you. We have on the slab rollers, these just stay here permanently, quite large sheets of canvas with a nice dotted line on both sides that marks halfway. And so you would use these for what I call the taco method of rolling through the slab, because basically you fold it up, right? And you're gonna set the clay right in the middle of the seam, like you're loading a taco up with food, right, that you're gonna eat, boom. And you're gonna be able to pick this up and carry it around like this. The other method is to do what I call the sandwich method, where you just take 2 sheets of canvas and you put one on the bottom and one underneath and one on top, and then roll it through that way. I don't like that as much. It tends to create more problems with them getting uneven, but it works just fine. If somehow these disappear, you can do that. But yeah, I'm going to demo with the taco method. And another thing I will say, a couple tips as far as like how this goes into the slab roller. One, you got to remember, if you make a log of clay, it's only going to go through the roller one direction, and it's going to go this way, and essentially all it's going to do is stretch it forward and backwards, right? It's going to stretch out this way. It's really just stretching backwards, but it's going to go that way. It's not going to get any wider. So if you need a wider slab, you have to have a wider log at the start. It's only going to go straight back. It might get a smidge wider as it squishes, but for the most part, it's just going to go backwards, not going to get wider, okay? That's one. And then another thing that's just very helpful as you get started that I've learned to recommend, although our slab rollers typically don't have problems. Some slab rollers, if you just stick this big fat log with a flat side on it into it, it tends to just catch the canvas and roll the canvas through, and it won't actually catch the clay. So a long time ago, I started having my students kind of turn their log or lug of clay that they're going to make a slab out of into a little ramp or wedge shape. And this smaller side is going to go into the slab roller as you get started, okay? You want to do that just to make it easier on yourself. And you're going to put that small wedge side right on that dotted line. You're going to fold your canvas back over, okay? You're going to try to keep it as straightly folded, fold it as straight as possible. You're going to pick this up, carry it, see how easy that is. We're going to come to this side, and remember, you're starting on the small side. It only goes one direction. And we're going to sort of set it right up against those rollers. Remember, there's canvas underneath and on top of the clay. We're going to roll it in. It's going to catch. Try to keep it as straight as you can so that the canvas doesn't catch on either side. If it does, it will just push out of the way. It's not a huge deal. But yeah, you just let it catch. You'll feel it catch pretty quick. And then you can just start rolling. While you're rolling, you want to be sure you keep the canvas, the top and bottom straight. You don't want them to twist on each other or create ruffles. That's a big deal when you're rolling with the slab roller, is not getting creases that are going to make your clay liable to crack in a section or too thin in a section. Okay, and I'm rolling counterclockwise. I'm just occasionally kind of pulling straight. I'm not getting in a big hurry. There's no rush here, right? We pull, only goes counterclockwise. Also, if you find yourself rolling up your fingers, just stop. Okay, it's not automatic. It's not going to eat up your fingers. You shouldn't really have your fingers close enough to get caught, but if they do, just pull your fingers back, right? Don't freak out. Don't be too stressed. This is not some bad automatic machine that's just going to eat through. If it's bad, just pull your hand out. No big deal. Okay, so we just keep pulling from this side. It's kind of good to occasionally check this side. Be sure it's nice and tight. You don't want to pull super hard, but just be sure no creases. Yeah, it's going well now. It's rolling. It's rolling. Rolling, keeping straight, boom, there you go. And you'll notice it stops moving at a certain point. I can roll and roll and it won't go. That's because we're through the clay, right? The rest of it's just empty canvas. So we pull this through. I can open up the top and boom, you should be able to see nice long slab. Notice, like I said, didn't get any longer or any wider, it just got longer. Yeah, we're set up. Also note the back half tends to get this sort of like tongue shape, like a peak, which makes it not very good for square slab making. You end up cutting about 10 to 15% off. Also the edges, the drier your clay is, the more the edges will fray as well. You can kind of tighten them up, or you might just have to cut them off. So you do lose some excess when using the slab roller. Let me go ahead. What I'm going to do here now is get set up. I'm going to go ahead and shift pan back, okay? Panning back here so I can show you a couple more things as I work. Okay, so I've rolled it through the slab roller. I can pick this up. I do need to be careful, right? You can pick this up, but you don't want to be carrying this all the way back to the other room. You just want to set it on your board, then carry it back. And then, first thing you're going to do when you get back to your seats, compress. That's right, yes. You're going to grab your metal rib, you're going to dip it in water, and you're going to start compressing. It's even more important to be sure that you do compression on slabs that come out of the slab roller. And can anyone guess why that is? Compression even more so. Oh yes, that is correct. It is because we, when using the slab roller, only stretched it one way, right? We didn't go different directions, right? So the particles aren't already kind of primed to be pulling in different ways. They're all set to be pulling as much as possible in one direction, right? So if we don't compress it, it's really likely to potato chip. You want to compress it well. It's also super easy because you have this canvas texture you can sort of fight against. And again, same thing too, while you're compressing, you want to be sure that you go different directions, all that sort of stuff, and do both sides, okay? You want to be sure you've done both sides. Yeah, just enough water so that your rib slides well over the surface. Nothing crazy. I hope you guys can hear me when I turn away from you. That'd be a mess if not, but I should have got a microphone for this. Anyway, okay, now, I've got this slab done, okay? And honestly, that's the majority of the demo here. But I need to talk a little bit about some nuances and things as beginners you want to think about. I might do a quick demo of how to wrap this or use a mold, like wrap this slab around something or set it into a mold, all that kind of stuff. But what I want to talk about first is what you do now that you have slabs. So it depends on what you're making, okay? First of all, unless you're laying it in a mold, you're probably going to want to let it set up to dry. Okay, if you're making something, especially larger things that are going to be very straight and kind of geometric, you need to let them set up. You don't want them set up so much that they're too dry and you can't slip and score them together and that it's just going to pull apart when you slip and score. But you also don't want to use it so wet that then when you slip and score together, it just sort of accordions or slumps down. Concertinas if you're into the Great British Baking Show. So yeah, you want to be sure this sets up a little bit. It's also another thing to think about if you want to cut shapes, right? So say you have a template or something that you know you want to build a house and it's five squares and then 3 triangles and all that sort of stuff. You want to think about the things that you want to do as far as like texture and surface decoration, and you might want to do that now while the clay is nice and wet. We have all kinds of texture tools and things that you can use to imprint, put textures and surface on this. And if you do it before and then cut out your templates, basically what that'll help prevent is, if you cut your templates out first and then use texture before you assemble them, as you press in the textures and stuff like that, it may stretch and change the shape of your template shapes as you're working. And so that's not great. You want to think about that. But you also want to think about if you let it dry too much before you use textures and stuff like that, it gets harder and harder to apply the textures, right, as the clay is surfaced. So I don't know, you want to start thinking about textures already at this point. You want to start thinking about cutting to shape, how sturdy you need it to be for the size, depending on what you're doing, that kind of stuff. The other thing to think about is, let's say, for instance, you're making just a box type of shape. A lot of people think, right, a cube is 6 sides, and you're just going to cut 6 squares that are the same. This sounds kind of odd, but I want to be sure and state to you guys, you want to make sure they're not exactly the same size. Because if you do that, when you go to assemble them, you're going to actually end up with a rectangle, right? Because you have to attach the side to the edge of something, right? And if they're like this, all of a sudden this side gets longer, right? Or if it's like this side gets longer, right? Whatever you want to do. So if you want a perfect cube, you're going to have to make a couple of the sides a little smaller to fit sort of inside of the shape, if that makes sense. We're going to talk a little bit about how to attach edges in a minute. But yeah, let me go ahead and start cutting some things up. Oh, there's also, I did want to talk about, what did I want to talk about? Drying. If you need to speed dry something, we do have fans. They're in here. There's large fans. There's also hair dryers, right? We have hair dryers and heat guns as well. If you're using a heat gun, you want to be sure you don't catch anything on fire because they're really, really hot. Hair dryers and fans are really better, especially because honestly, slabs dry super fast. You just stretch the clay out, exposed a bunch of surface area to the air, and it's just going to dry quickly. That's another thing you want to think about is when you're wrapping this in plastic between work sessions, you might want to think about fully enveloping the slab in plastic. So on top of your board and over the slab. Think about that because I've seen tons of students cover just the top of their slab and the slab is still touching the board they're working on and the board actually dries out the slab as it sits or something over a weekend especially. So anyway, start thinking about that. I know I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but I'm trying to figure out, again, if you miss my demos and talks, how you're going to set up. So I want to talk super quickly about when you assemble things in terms of how edges should go together. So for one thing you want to be sure is if you've got a base and you're going to start attaching walls to it, be sure that the walls go on top. We don't want the base attached to the side of a wall. It's just very, very likely because of surface tension as it sits on a table to, like, as it dries or something, the wall pull away because it's catching on the board or something you're working on. And yeah, it just tends to work better if you've got gravity on your side holding the walls down on your base. Okay, so there's that. Be sure you slip and score it, all that sort of stuff. The other thing I see students do a lot, let's pretend these are just walls. You've already got a base set and you want to set, I don't know why, but for some reason a lot of students, they cut these edges like this to be square and then they just attach these two corners together, and that's a bad idea. It's just not enough surface area. No matter how much you slip and score this is just not going to be a good attachment. What you want to do is a couple different versions. First off, just think of attaching the edge of one slab to the flat face of another. Boom. That's how you should do that. It's going to maximize surface area that gets slipped and scored. It's also why I said to make sure your slabs don't get too thin, all that sort of stuff. If you're just going to attach these, you can use really good pressure on this side now. It's just much better than like a little corner, like spindly little attachment. Yeah, just flat side to edge. That's what you want, if that makes sense. I'm going to get even closer, just making sure you guys can see. Those are your options. Or there's another option called mitering. This is more of like a woodworking thing, and a lot of beginning clay students don't want to do this. It's really great kind of idea with the fettling knife. What you can essentially do is cut 45-degree angles into your slabs where you know they're going to join. This is actually also a cheat for those of you that are mathematically minded. You might see why this would be great. If you do want to be able to cut your cube sides to all be the same size, you can actually use this and it'll still work. But basically, as far as attaching things go, you can miter it, which basically it means putting a 45-degree angle on your slabs and creating this almost like corner joinery, right? Where it's going to have this really fine seam on the inside and out, slip and score that. It actually maximizes the amount of slipping and scoring space that you can have, but it's really, really great for joining edges together. So think about that as a method. Again, this would have to be slipped and scored to stay, but yeah, there you go. There's that. Now, let me really quickly just demonstrate how you might use a slab over a form. Okay, so you can just cut your slab to shape and then lay it into what we call a slump mold, which is where it's a hollow space that you lay a slab into. That's really great because let's say you form it and then you want to go home for the day between work sessions. and you don't want to, it's like too wet or something, it's too like difficult to take out of the form, it's really great with a slump mold, because most of the time, if you just let it dry and the clay starts to shrink, it will actually pull away from the walls of your slump mold, and you can just leave it in there. Now, the opposite of that, let's say you've got a hump mold where you're laying a slab on the outside of your mold. You can do that, but you have to make sure before you leave for the session that you either wrap it up super duper well with plastic so the clay doesn't dry out or shrink at all, or better yet, take it off of the mold as quick as you can, because as clay shrinks, it's going to get tighter and tighter. Even if you have newspaper or something in there, or you're using a plaster mold, your slab is going to shrink and shrink. It's going to get tighter and tighter on that hump mold, and eventually it'll crack itself if you let it sit there and dry. So you have to take it off. And again, yeah, that's what's better about a slump mold, right, where it's down inside. As it shrinks, it pulls away from the walls. I usually do this as sort of a pop quiz sort of question answer deal in class, but just something to think about. If the mold's on the inside of the form, you got to take the clay off. If the clay is on the inside of the mold, you can leave it. Okay, so anyway, that's just different molds. I don't have examples here. We have them in class, so if you ever want to use them, I've already showed you that. But besides that, I just want to do a quick demo. I usually do of wrapping clay around a tube, right, so that you can get a nice cylinder, okay? I've already got the stuff here, so let me show you how to do that. For one thing, we're really just going to focus on the walls right now. I have a slab that I'm going to use for my walls, and then actually that first slab that I hand rolled, that's what I'm going to use as my base. Okay, so it's all set up. I've got the walls of this done. Notice I'm only cut one edge to be flat, I guess, yeah, the bottom edge to be flat. The top I'm going to leave rough and cut after the fact. And then I actually just make sure I've got more than enough clay in length, and then I'll actually cut it as I form it, so that it's exactly the shape I need. I'm not trying to make this fit exactly that. I'm going to make this excessively large and then cut it as I apply it. So first off, before you use a tube, you want to ask yourself what it's made of. You're probably not going to be able to use wooden tubes for most of these sorts of things. You're going to use PVC or metal. So if you're doing that, you need to wrap it in something that's going to make sure the clay doesn't stick to the surface. Our best bet in here is to use newspaper, okay? So we always have newspaper. I think in the assignment sometimes I say wax paper or plastic, but newspaper is just fine. And then I learned a long time ago, it makes your life a lot easier if when you wrap your PVC pipe in plastic, you just get a little piece of tape and hold this on. I tried for years. I would do this demo, just holding it like this and then trying to apply the clay while I hold the newspaper still, and that was sort of silly feeling, and I realized, boom, I just put this tape, and now the newspaper is attached to the PVC. Good to go. Okay, so it's ready. I know I'm moving fast here, but try not to make this video too excessively long. But I've got my PVC here. I've got the newspaper around it. I'm going to start wrapping my clay with the flat edge, that I designed to be the bottom down. And then, yeah, wow, I've got way more clay than I needed. That's good. I'll figure out something to do with the scraps in a bit. Maybe I can make a handle out of it, or decorations, some kind of medallions or cookies that I'd stick on. I could say cookies of clay shapes or something. Anyway, but yeah, I've got it good to go. I'm going to go ahead and cut this pretty close to where that other edge of clay is. And notice I'm going to cut this, so I'm going to kind of miter it in a way. So I cut one line that actually angles a little bit inward. So this edge is at a 45, cutting back towards the pot. And then this one I'm going to make at a 45, cutting away from the pot. Again, this just maximizes my slipping and scoring abilities, right? Remembering that clay's malleable too. If I need to stretch or move it, I can always do that. So yeah, it's ready to go. I'm going to slip and score this using, I like the toothed ribs. If you've seen my coil demo, you already know this. And I get a little slip here. I'm just going to use a little water, which you shouldn't do. You slip, and I just mark this up real good. Nice scoring as I apply slip or make slip on the surface. Boom, boom, boom. It's ready to go. Here, got my towel here to dry my hands off. And then I'm just going to press this seam together. Okay. Pushing, stretching if I need to, moving it. I didn't do that super exact. You guys could take more time and do it more exact, or you could, like I said, it's kind of nice. You don't have to be perfect. You can sort of stretch and move it, and then you can actually use your rib afterward if you've got excess to just smooth that out. And look at that. I mean, Yeah, pretty easily. If you're manipulating your clay at a softer state, it's easy to hide the seam where you joined on the cylinder. This is something where you wouldn't want to leave the slab out to dry more, which is why it's the demo that I add on to this video. But yeah, I've got this joint. Something you want to think about though is you are going to have to, when you pull the PVC tube out, you're going to need to use a stick or something to do this same sort of move where I smooth the seam out on the inside. You can actually, there's no reason you couldn't cut this clay to be really extra long and then leave that seam. That works fine, just as long as you slip and score it well and leave it clean on the inside. You can actually leave the seam showing. Yeah, nothing against that. That's an option for you. Some people even use excess seam, like this extra clay, to like make a handle or something here too, like a fold-in handle, hand warmer kind of handle. But anyway, yeah, I've got this PVC tube of clay ready to go. Now I want to set it on space. And like I said, no, I just already have another slab ready to go. I'm actually just going to use the excess from that wall of clay that I wrapped around. And I'm gonna just attach the walls to the bottom. Now, I'm not actually gonna cut this first. You know, I don't wanna cut this to be perfectly circular and then attach. I find it actually helps if you just, again, make sure this base that you're gonna attach is way more clay than you need. I'm gonna set this down. I'm gonna use the needle this time, all right? And I'm gonna just make a quick circle of clay where that base is, but I'm not cutting through. It's just a little like scored circle that then I'm going to slip and score this bottom edge, and then I'm gonna score and slip this bottom edge right around that circle. And I don't have to be real clean about this because as far as the inside goes, I can clean it later, and then I'm gonna cut off anything on the outside. So anyway, I slipped and scored both the top and the bottom. Remember, slipping and scoring, you have to do both edges. And then I'm just gonna set this back down. Now, if you use something that's a more oblong shape as part of this, you're setting like something right like an oval or something, you might wanna be sure you put it back in the same spot that you marked and all that kind of stuff. That'll make sense when you're working on something like that. But for the most part, this method is just for cylinders. But yeah, I set this down and I'm just gonna push down on my walls of clay. And another thing I can do, because I left this kind of excessively long, is I can pull up on this extra clay here before I cut it off to really be sure that the slipping and scoring has also had the adequate pressure applied, right? Because remember, slipping and scoring is not just about the slip and the scoring, it's about pressure, right? Pushing those joints together. So anyway, yeah, I pulled up, I've done all that, and now I'm going to cut this off, right? Okay, cut it, boom, and there we go. We've got a nice cylinder with a base attached. We can clean this up. You can do some cool fancy maneuvers here. You can take and shove it up, or you can just clean the base. I have another video about how to properly clean the bottom of pots, whether dry or leather hard. I'll attach that somewhere else in the class, and be sure you know how to do this sort of cleaning up of the bottom. But yeah, there you go. Then you could take a Lazy Susan or something, or you can do it by hand. It'd be great if you got a banding wheel or one of our what I call the Lazy Susans, but banding wheels in proper terms. Just cut this to be flat as you need, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, and you're good to go. Now, I do want to be sure and go over to demonstrate really quick, taking these out, taking the PVC out of this shape. So what students do a lot, and they'll kind of freak out. They'll come up to me and they'll be pulling on the PVC tube and all this sort of stuff, and they'll be yanking, be pulling here, and it's just stuck. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's gonna come apart. I can't take it apart, and they're crying and they're calling their mom and blah, 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 all sorts of stuff that's unnecessary. Because what happens, if you're trying to pull this with the newspaper out all at once, it's not gonna work. What you have to do is reach down, you can even tear the newspaper you need, and pull just the PVC pipe out. Don't worry about getting the newspaper all at once. The newspaper can stay, and then you can just yank that out after the fact, okay? Another thing that I forgot to say, when this PVC pipe is in there, I know this is silly, but I'm just demonstrating. Don't, you know, when you're attaching your base, your walls onto your base, a lot of people want to tap down on the table, right? They have the PVC and they're short tapping down to get that pressure for the slipping and scoring to join. But the problem here is, because we're using hollow tubes, it can become sort of a cookie cutter, and you'll end up popping out the bottom of your cup or whatever base you're making. So be sure you don't do that. Just use the pressure up, push down on the walls, like I said, and then pull the PVC out as I was saying before, see, this is what happens if you don't use newspaper. It's like super difficult or permanently stuck there. You want to do that. You want to pull the PVC out before it gets super dry and starts to shrink. And if you let this dry quite a bit and it's super leather hard, even with the newspaper, it might be very difficult to get the PVC pipe out anyway because it's shrunk and like gripped onto it so much. But yeah, after I take this out too, remember you want to take a tool, stick tool or something of some kind, and clean up that joint on the inside. You want to clean this rim up, all the sorts of stuff, finish, apply textures, stick on handles, all the things you want to do, finish the bottom. Like I said, I have another video for that. But yeah, there you go. There's a nice basic cylinder shape. Just one of the many things you could do with slabs. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say for the demo. I already talked about being sure you store things well between sessions. Be sure it's wrapped up super tight. It's always better to wrap things too much and they don't dry between your classes, and then you can use hair dryer or fan or something to speed dry it, than it is to come in after a weekend and find all your slabs dried out and you have to start totally over. Okay, so think about that. I think we're in pretty good shape. If there's anything else I think of later, I'll just add to this video in like the comments or where I post it on Canvas. But yeah, for the most part, that is that. Hope you enjoyed.